Right, let's get an update from Ukraine now. Russian forces in the east of the country have pushed forward and taken some ground. That's according to the Ukrainian government. President Zelensky has said the Donbas region is completely destroyed. The trial of the first Russian soldier to be accused of war crimes in Ukraine is continuing in Kiev. Meanwhile, the lawyer acting for 21-year-old Vadim Shishimarin, who was admitted shooting an unarmed civilian, says he is not guilty of a premeditated war crime. James Waterhouse reports.
In the first war crimes trial in this conflict, it's the turn of the defence. Vadim Shishimarin, a 21-year-old Russian soldier, has admitted shooting dead a 61-year-old unarmed man. His lawyer argues it shouldn't be a war crime as he was following orders and feared for his life. The prosecution says he could have just scared the civilian off instead of firing 4 rounds at him. Once again, Shishimarin apologised, telling the court, "I sincerely repent. At that moment, I was very nervous." More war crime trials will follow, but President Zelensky doesn't want to stop here. He again has accused occupying forces of genocide, deliberately trying to kill as many Ukrainians as possible, not least in the eastern Donbas region. It's now Russia's priority. Moscow's always denied genocide, but sees it as its own. It's where the fighting is most concentrated, in towns like Severodonetsk, where those staying to fight are separated from those who can't.
The armed forces of Ukraine continue the liberation of the Kharkiv region, but in Donbas, the occupiers are trying to increase pressure. That's hell, and that's not an exaggeration.
The Russians are making small advances in the east. In the Luhansk region, the Ukrainians continue to defend and frustrate. Their extraordinary resistance is both down to their resolve and support from the West. The US has just signed off on the biggest package yet, £32 billion, military, humanitarian and economic help.
The future of America's security and core strategic interests will be shaped by the outcome of this fight. Anyone concerned about the cost of supporting a Ukrainian victory should consider the much larger cost should Ukraine lose.
For Ukraine, the city of Mariupol is finally lost. Almost 2,000 fighters are thought to have surrendered so far, to a fate which could include a war crimes trial of Russia's own. James Waterhouse, BBC News in Kiev.
And we can go live now to Kiev and speak to James. Hi, James. So let's pick up there on the events in the east. A couple of things President Zelensky saying is being completely destroyed, and also pointing to those Russian advances. How significant are those Russian advances there?
I think they're continuing to cause problems for the Ukrainians. I think it's a reminder that the Russians do have more firepower. Yes, they have pulled back and they've realigned their goals in this invasion, but they are closer to their border, and they have the means to inflict a much more sustained attack on villages, because on one hand, the Russians have struggled to penetrate towns and cities and villages. Their urban warfare has been found wanting in this war, which is why they have resorted to surround and bombard. There is now a front line, a much more solidly formed front line, forming along the eastern Donbas region, and the Russians are continuing to launch assaults to the devastation of these locations and the communities that live in them. Just because this war has become more concentrated in the eastern Donbas does not mean that Vladimir Putin will be shelving his ambitions for long. There could be a chance he could escalate things in the future, which is why I think the West are very keen currently to keep pledging their long-term support so Ukraine can continue to defend itself.
Well, let's pick up on that thought, James. The longer this goes on, if it is a long, drawn-out conflict, who does that benefit, the Ukrainians or the Russians?
It certainly doesn't benefit the Ukrainians. I mean, first and foremost, they are the one, Ukraine is the country under attack with its very future under threat. The Russians are not averse to getting bogged down into a long-term conflict. There have been 8 years of war to this point where they have backed separatists and they've long annexed Crimea. It's clear that Vladimir Putin does have the appetite for a long and drawn-out fight. That said, the longer his campaign is frustrated, the more losses he sustains will lead to more questions, potentially from his inner circle, or certainly the families of those soldiers who die along the way. That could well create problems. But many Russians believe what they watch on TV. Many have faith in their leader, and they want to believe that their relatives who lose their lives in this war do so for a worthy cause. I think if this does drag out and this fighting does become more concentrated, and it's certainly starting to look like that, it will be as ever to the detriment of Ukraine. Peace talks are not happening currently. There is no dialogue. And that's the more likely outcome in this war, alongside either a change of leadership in Russia or a change of heart from Vladimir Putin himself.
OK, James, thanks so much for bringing us that update there from the Ukrainian capital. Thank you.